very much, Matthew. Okay. Once again, this week's broadcast are being sponsored by the Zalti family and the Mishras, our beloved Rav Moshe and Rav Chaim, the Miyastim of our Bismedrish, who cared very much about each and every one of us. So the last thing we learned was the Mishnah, but it's Kedai to Chazer it over. Well, actually, no, we learned the Mishnah and we finished the Gemara on it, about Avos, right? And we learned that you're working together on a field, in a vineyard, in a row, according to Rabbi Yehuda, only if you're close enough that your digging is going to soften up the earth to make his digging easier, then you're not allowed to. But if you're far away from him, where your digging will not impact what he's doing, it's mutter, and Reb Meir is geyser, rachayk atukar. Okay, now we're up to the Mishnah on top of Membeis Amaralov, Amudur Hano Mechaveirei, Lefnei Shvius. If someone was Mudur Hano from his friend, he was not allowed to have Hano from his friend, Lefnei Shvius. The neder was made not in a Shemitah year, the year before the Shemitah year. So then the halacha is, Eino Yored Laseich Sadei. Number one is, if I'm not allowed to have enough from you, I'm not allowed to set foot in your field. That's Drishas Aregel, and this is going according to Rabbi Eliezer, who we said earlier, holds Viter Asr B'Mudar Hana, even something that normally you wouldn't charge for, someone to step foot into your field, but a Mudar Hana may not have that Hana. So he's not even allowed to set foot into your field. Not only that, what if you have a tree that's hanging over the Rishus Harabim, and there's low-hanging fruit there, literally, not figuratively. There's low-hanging fruit there, you're not allowed to take those fruits, they're his fruits. Ubishvius. But on Shemitah, on the Shemitah year, where his fruits are Hefker, you're still not allowed to go into his field because it's Drishas Regel. You're allowed to eat min hanoitos. I believe the aleph of the bach takes away the netilos. Min hanoitos from those fruits that are hanging over. So there's two ways to learn this Mishnah that the Gemara is going to work on. What does Uba Shvius mean? Does this mean he made the neder before Shvius? Before Shvius, you're not allowed to walk into his field, nor are you allowed to take his pears. But once Shvius arrives, you're allowed to take from the pears that are hanging over the border. Is that what it means? Or does it mean Uba Shvius, if your neder was originally made on Shemitah, then I will What is the nafkamina between these two ways to understand the Mishnah? The nafkamina is, if you made someone Asr Bano before Shemitah, and then Shemitah arrives, those pears are no longer yours, right? Is he still Asr from having an from those pears? So if you learn that Uva Shvius in our Mishnah means you made a neder on Shvius, it would be mashma that if you made a neder before Shvius, the halacha that the Mishnah says remains the same whether it's on Shvius or not, and the pears remain Asr, even though now they became Hefker. What would the svara for that be? That's a good question. That's a good question. But I'm just want to focus on what the halacha will be. The Gemara is going to delve into what the reason would be. However, if you learn Uba Shvius means even with the same neder, once Shvius arrives, you're now allowed to eat the pears. Then of course that means once they become Hefker, they become mutter. And Mati asks, why would they remain Asr after they become Hefker? That's a very good question. That's what the Gemara is going to get into, and that is going to be the focus of the whole Gemara today. Is this exact shaila how to understand the Mishnah? Does Uba Shvius mean the same neder? And what is the halacha when Shvius arrives? Or does the Shvius mean if the neder was made on Shvius? Okay, gewaltig. Actually, when it comes to Shemitah, do you know there's actually a machlokes early achreinim, I believe the Mabit and the Chinuch, whether or not on Shemitah do your pears automatically become Hefker, or is there a chiyuv to be mafker? If you violate and you're not mafker and someone takes it, is he over or not? So there's actually a big shaila about that. There's a lot of nafkaminas, but the most obvious nafkamina is if you're over exhaling. There's other nafkaminas. If a woman's mechuyit, if you have to actively be mafkir the field, so then it's a mitzvah to say shazman groma. But if it automatically becomes hefker, then not. The nafkamina would also be if you have to, if the owner is not mafkir, does he have to be mafresh trumas and maishras? Well, the shaila by shemitah, what is the chiyuv? It says you have to shemoit, you have to abandon your field, right? What does abandon mean? Does that mean you have to be mafkir, or since it's hefker, you have to be mafkir? So there's actually such a shaila. Okay, so what is the Gemara? What does the Mishnah say about here? Nader hemenu Michael. What if I didn't say you're not allowed to have any hana for me? You're not allowed to have a hana of food for me. So right off the bat, now you're allowed to enter my property. So Nader hemenu Michael of Neshrius, Yored l'tzarich sadei. He's allowed to go into your field because that's not something that you answered. But the payers, but he wouldn't be able to eat payers because that's the Issur Neder for him. And on Shvius, he's allowed to go and take because he was always allowed to walk through the field, and now the pairs are him. Well, you also see from here that normally on Shemitah, you're not mafka your field. Your field doesn't become hefker. The pairs in your field become hefker. So the shaila is, how do you get in to get the pairs? So the halacha is that you have to let people into your property to collect those pairs. Because technically, you were never mafka your field. There's actually a shaila halacha. What if, if you're talking about a field, so who cares if someone comes into your field? What if you have a tree in your backyard? Technically, the fruit on that tree are hefker. Well, you don't want people going trampling through your private property where you live the whole day. So the halacha is you're actually allowed to tell them, you don't come in, and I'll bring it out for you. So you don't have to let them come to your property. But if you're not going to bring it out for them, then you actually have to let them come through your property. Another very interesting tidbit is that we know that the malachas, there's some malachas that are also to do with the rice on Shemitah, but most halachas, most of the improvements you would do to a property are only also midei rabbanan on Shemitah. So the shaila is, what happens if the tree is in danger of dying if you don't do a certain remedy on it? You have to water it. What if it needs something? So the halacha is everybody agrees you're allowed to take the measure that the tree shouldn't die, even on Shemitah. But what happens if the tree's not going to die, but all the fruit on the tree are going to die if you don't take a certain remedy? Are you allowed to violate the Shemitah and do malachas d'Rabbanan to save the pears? So this is a machlokes, and this is an unusual situation, I believe, because it's a machlokes the Chazon Ish and Rav Kook, and the Chazon Ish is mekel, and Rav Kook is machmer. The Chazon Ish holds if even the pears are in danger of dying, you're allowed to do the malachas d'Rabbanan to save those pears. Rav Kook says you're not allowed to only if the whole tree is going to die. So if you want to know who's the machmer, who's the mekel, the Chazon Ish would be a mekel. Well, you're asking where the person is physically located, but the fruit. But the question is who the fruit belongs to. That tells you where you're standing. Right. It talks about the space. So why is that a steer to this? Right. He's allowed to take it. He's allowed to take it if it's mutter for him to have a no. If it's not mutter for him to have a no from the owner, he's not allowed to take it. The difference is if he can access it without getting into the property. That's the only difference. That's the only difference. If he can access it without getting into the property. So that's all it's like. Since he can't come into the property, can he still access the pears that are sticking out? But of course, the pairs are belong to the owner. Because the Issur enough. You're not allowed to have enough from this. Correct. Exactly. There's this tree. So it doesn't make a difference if it right, but regardless of where it's considered, where it is, whose it is defined. It's the owner's. You're saying it's not even a steer, because we're also saying it goes bust of the trunk. But I'm saying even if that's the case, they're still not related to one another, because who it belongs to and where it is are different from one another. Okay, so Rabbi Shmuel. So I just want to review again. We had a shaila how to understand the Mishnah. When the Mishnah's second case is Uva Shvius, is that a continuation of the original story? The neder that was made before Shvius, how will it impact on Shvius? Or that's not the question. Uva Shvius means a whole new case where the neder was made on Shvius. So Zok Gemara, Rabbi Shmuel, the Amr Tavayu, Rabbi and Shmuel, that both said, and here the Girsa is very relevant. We'll learn it like the Bach, but there's a lot of talking about it. The Amr Tavayu, Nichsi Alecha. If I said Nichsi Alecha, my nechasim should be usher to you, Lifnei Shvius. If I said this before Shemitah, Ein Yored L'Soich Sadeyu, so you're not allowed to come into my field, because all my nechasim, including my field, is usher to you. And you're not allowed to eat from fruit of my tree, even though my tree is leaning over into Rosh Hashanah. Af al pi shegia shvius. Even if shvius arrives, and now technically my pairs are hefker, you're still not allowed to have hana from my pairs. The im b'shvius nadar, but if the neder was first made on shvius, then ein yored l'soich sadeyu, you're not allowed to come into my field. Aval oichel min hanoitos, but you are allowed to eat from my pairs, because my pairs are hefker, but my property is not. So that's a Rav and Shmuel learned. And Mati's question remains: why is it that the pairs should remain usher if now they're hefker and they're no longer my pairs? Especially since it said nichsi alecha, my possessions are usher to you, and come Shemitah, these pairs are no longer my possessions. Let's see what the Ran says. The Kasabi Rabbi Shmuel, Yafagav the Kulu Peir to Hefker Inun, even though the pairs are Hefker, exactly Mati's question, Afilu Hochi, Kivon de Bishoshe Diroi, Hoyu Shaloi. Since at the time that I made that Issur, the pairs were mine, Chayel Issura, the Issur will be Chal to that person on my pairs, Afilu Bishviyas Sheyotzum Reshusoi, even on Shemitah when these pairs are no longer in my Rishus. And based on this, the two cases of our Mishnah are two separate halachas. The first case is speaking where you made the neder before Shemitah year, and we learned that Kivan Shehidiroi Lifnei Shvius, the bout you made the neder before Shemitah while the pairs were still yours. Chayil Nidre Afilu Kimata Shvius. The pairs remain usher even when Shemitah arrives. That's the first case. The second case was Shvius, the Shvius Nadar, if the nether was made on Shemitah itself, even though my nether will not answer you on the pairs because they're not my pairs anymore at the time that I'm actually making the nether, you're still prohibited to come into my property because the property belongs to me. The Gemara, the Gemara is going to get into more detail as to how it works. If I made a neder on pairs, how is it that the Issur remains even after the pairs are no longer mine? We all agree if I sold those pairs to somebody else, they probably wouldn't be Issur anymore. So we're going to look at that closely. That is the Shita of Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, the Amri Tarvayu, Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, they both said, Nichzi Alecha. If I say my nechasim are usher on you, lifnei shvius, and I said it before Shemitah, ein yored l'soich sadeyu, before the Shemitah year, you cannot go into my field because you're not allowed to have enough in my field. And you cannot eat peiros because they're mine. But he gives shvius. But once Shemitah arrives and these pairs are no longer mine, you're still not allowed to come into my field because the field is still mine. Okay? This is going to involve a little bit more of a complicated run. So let's see the run. Rabbi Yochanan v'Shlokish Ami Tavayu, Aval Oichel ben Anoitis v'loy mitzabehu mishum nidra de mekamis shvius. The neder that you made before shvius to answer your payers has no impact on Shemitah when the payers no longer belong to you. Before we do the run, I see there's a lema. So let's suggest that this is the machlokes between Rav and Shmuel on one side and Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish on the other side. The Rav Shmuel Sabri Adam Issur Davish Rishusai Afilu L'Chashiyete Mershusai. You can ask for something that's in your rishos, like your payers before the Shemitah year, and they'll remain Issur even after they leave your rishos. Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish Sabri. And Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish, you cannot do that. So at this point in the Gemara, the Ran's going to tell us that it's a structural issue. It's not a question of what I meant to do. Even if I expressly state I want to answer my payers even after their hefker, according to Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish, you can't do that. You don't have the ability to do that. You don't have control over the payers. According to Rav and Shmuel, you could. Based on this pshat, Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish are easy to understand because logic should say that once it's not mine, I shouldn't be able to answer it. Rav and Shmuel is going to need some explanation. So that's the first step of the Gemara, where the Gemara suggests that there might be a structural machlokes between Rav and Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Is it possible for you to answer something and the issue will remain even after your mafka the payers? And that will have a great impact into how they understand the Mishnah. So let's just clarify. According to the way Rav and Shmuel understood the Mishnah, both the Reisha and the Seifa provided us with a chiddush. The chiddush of the Reisha was a huge chiddush, that when you ask your payers today, they remain usher even after their hefker, right? And the Seifa is the chiddush, is that even though the payers are hefker, my property isn't, and you cannot come into my property even on Shemitah. So there's a very geshmak chiddush in the Reisha of the Mishnah and in the Seifa of the Mishnah. According to Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, we're going to have a little bit of a problem with the chiddush of the Reisha of the Mishnah.
The property is us, the property is looking for them. Never us, it's never us.
I hear your shaila, but at least the Ram does say that, right? The Ram does say that the Seif Ashminan. I'm like 4 or 5 lines up in that longish round that we learned in the skinny lines. The Mishvis Nodar Nehida Lechal Nidra Legabe Peri Hefker Ninu Legabe Aramiachai. So the Ram says that's the chiddush. It might not be the bombshell chiddush like the Reisha that tells you your parish remain usher even after the hefker, but it's a chiddush. It's a chiddush it's a chiddush that the neder is chal gabi my property. Because you might think with a svart it shouldn't be chal. Because let me ask you a question: on a regular Shemitah year, a person has a right to come into my property to pick the payers. He gets the right of access. So maybe I shouldn't be able to answer. So maybe my Issur not shouldn't work. Since you have a right of access, so it's not mine to answer, so I shouldn't be able to answer. Kamach Malon, that no, even though I can't answer you from taking the payers, I can stop you from coming into my property. So there is a little bit of a chiddush in it, because you might say that it's not in my control. Okay. The Rav Shmuel Sabri Adam Issur, Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish Adam Issur. It's a long run, it's not complicated, but it's detailed, so I'm going to try to simplify it. Nearly. The Haki Perusha the Shmaita. This is Pshat in the Gemara. The Kasalkadait and Hashta. And whenever the Ram says that, you know that this is not going to be the Mashkan of the Gemara. So right now we're suggesting that there's a structural machlokes. Is it possible for somebody, even if he expressly wants to, is it possible for him to answer something after it becomes Hefker? And the issue should remain even after it becomes Hefker. The Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish, Kulu apirusha de maslisin time. Right now, it seems like the machlokes is in how to understand the Mishnah. At the end of the sugya, they're both going to agree pshat of the Mishnah. But right now, it seems like there's a machlokes of how to teach the Mishnah. Rabbi Shmuel mafrashalok the precious that the first case is speaking when the neder was made before the Shemitah year, and the second case is when the neder was made on the Shemitah year. Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish mafrashalok the chatakatani. The whole Mishnah is speaking when you made the neder before Shvius, and the Mishnah is discussing the impact of that neder once Shvius arrives, and the Mishnah is saying that the neder loses its koyach to asher the pairs once Shemitah arrives because the pairs are now hefker. Vika Omar, and they said, the neder zeh shnei dinim yeshloi. Now it's become a brisker neder. It's a neder with 2 dinim. The lefnei Shvius chayal neder lagamri. Before Shemitah, according to Rabbi Yechon Rish Lakish, the neder is chayal, because the person may not access your property, and you may not eat any of your payers. But once the Shemitah year arrives, and now the payers are hefker, part of your Issur of neder evaporates. Even though the property still remains usher, because the property is still mine and it does not become hefker on Shemitah. Nevertheless, Zogan Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish Peri Sharu. Why? On Shemitah they leave my rishus, so therefore my Issur no can no longer impact those pairs. The Afal B Shahidiroi Vishosh Higher Rishusai. The Handle of Nashvias. Even though when did I place the Issur on these pairs? When they were mine. So who said they should just evaporate? Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish. Even though at the time that I'm placing the Issur, these payers are in my rishus, I don't have control over them once they leave my rishus. And therefore, even though I made the Issur before they left my rishus, once they leave my rishus, they don't have any connection to me, and my Issur will not impact it. But based on this, the ratio of the Mishnah is not going to have a chiddush component to it. According to Rav and Shmuel, the ratio is a massive chiddush, that your Issur lasts even after it's hefker. But according to the way Rabbi Yechon Rish Lakish learns, there's no chiddush in the ratio. Unehi the ratio lo yashmin niti. Now there's no chiddush in the ratio of the Mishnah. The pshita the lefnei shvius any yored ve'no yochel. I need a Mishnah to tell me that if on a regular year you tell somebody that you may not have a not from me, that it's also from to eat your pears, that it's also from to walk into your field. I don't need a Mishnah to tell me that. So the whole ratio now is completely redundant, according to Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Nevertheless, severe lahu, they'll hold the nokat ratio mishum seifa. The chiddush of the ratio is not there, but we needed to build up the case in order to get to the seifa. La ashemino to teach us this halacha gufa. Da'afal pishe diroi lefnei shvius shahayu peres b'rishusai ein yisurei chal la'achar sheyetem b'rishusai t'hainu b'shvius. So that's really the whole chiddush of the Mishnah. That even though you asked for these pairs while they were yours, when Shavuos arrives, they're no longer awesome. But the Reisha has no chiddush. So according to Rav and Shmuel, both the Reisha and the Sefer delivers a chiddush. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the Reisha does not deliver a chiddush, but it's a lead up to the Sefer, which is a big chiddush. Umishum hachi have a salak adaite to Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish Sabri, and this is why the Gemara in the Havamina thinks that what Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish meant was the ein adam oisher davar shebeshusay lechesiyechem reshusay afilu heichadam nechasam elu. Even if you did nechasam elu, if I tell you nechasai alecha, my nechasam should be asher to you. So then my intention is that they should only be asher to you while they're mine. I said nechasai, but if I say nechasam elu should be asher to you, I'm not connecting the Issur to the fact that these nechasim belong to me. I'm only placing an Issur on the nechasim themselves. So now the Ranjish introduced a whole new layer. Until now, we were talking about structurally, can I make something usher that will remain usher after it's hefker? Now we're getting into what did I mean to do? So if I said nechasai alecha, there you would say my intention is while they're connected to me, they should be usher to you. Once they're no longer mine, they shouldn't be usher to you. But if I said nechasim elu should be usher to you, that's I'm disconnecting the Issur from me. It's all about these nechashim should be usher to you. Those nechashim will be usher to you even after they're no longer mine. So what the Bryce, what the Ran is saying is over here. At this point, we hold that Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish holds the ein adam oisher davar shebeshushay lechesiyechem b'shushay afilu heichadam nechasam elu. Even if you know that's my intention, even if I try specifically to make an Issur that will last even after I'm after them, even that does not work because structurally you can't do that. Inami, even if someone says, I want these pairs to be usher on you, even if I'm after them, I want them to remain usher to you, that doesn't work because a person doesn't have the power to do that. That's what we think at this moment. And this is what the Gemara thinks at this point. Look at the words that Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish used. Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish Amr Tavayu Nichasai Olecha. From that's a lotion that they are mine while they belong to me. They're also to you. That's where they said that it doesn't work. What they really should have said is a much bigger chiddush. They should have even said Nechasam Elu Alecha. Even there it doesn't work, right? But they said a smaller chiddush. You could misunderstand them that they're just saying my intention is not to aser. But if I actually explicitly wanted to aser, maybe it would work. So at this point, we have to say that it's lav dafka. So you're going to have to say, even though they didn't explicitly say that, even if I want it to happen, it doesn't happen. They don't say that. They just say nixi, but you have to say that they mean to include that based on what we think now. Why are we compelled to say that? Why don't we just take Rabbi Yochanan at face value? That when you said Nechasai Alecha, there the Issur doesn't survive you. But maybe if you said the Chasam Elu, or if I specifically said I want it to remain Usher even after I'm upgrade, maybe it will work. How do you know Rabbi Yochanan knows it can't work? We show the Bishlam Iamrinon, Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish, Amri Hachi, B'Nechasam Elu. Bishlam, if you would understand Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish to say that even if you explicitly want the Issur to remain, it still doesn't remain, then it'll make sense. The toleration should say for the precious. Then at least the sefer of the Mishnah is a chiddush that it doesn't work. The Apagab the Amir Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish Nichasai, even though they said Nichasai, that's what their case was. It's lav dafka the Amir Nichasai B'chud Elam Nechasam Elu the Amir Rav Shmuel Kami. They're even maintaining their halacha in the case where you said Nechasam Elu, which means you intend to keep it usher even though they no longer belong to you. So you have to say that Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, even though they really didn't use the best term to illustrate that they hold it cannot happen even if you want it to happen, because they picked the lashon that the lashon itself is mashma that I want to answer it. You have to say to lav dafka. They meant under any circumstance you can never ask for something when it's not yours anymore. If you're going to diminish the chiddush of Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish and say that of course you could if you wanted to, but the reason why in their case it's not also after it becomes Hefker is because that's what they meant in their nether, nuchasai, while they're still mine. But if that's the case, then the Mishnah is not telling you any chiddush whatsoever. Reisha vadila tzricha lashmina. There's no chiddush in the Reisha, which merely tells me the lefnei shvius chayal nidr lagamri. That's push. It's a regular nether. Shvius has no impact on it because it's not the shmita year yet. The chitema mishum seifa nakatla. And if you want to say what we said earlier, that the chiddush is the seifa lashmina to teach us the kivan the mikar amenichasai. Since I really said the chasai, therefore kishagias shvius huter miktsasai shall nether zeh. The Hainu Linachila, and if the whole chiddush is that once Shemitah arrives, since these are no longer mine chasim, they now become mutter because of how I expressed the nether, I connected the nether that the Issur should be while they belong to me. I don't need our Mishnah here to tell me that Allah. The pshita the velosha nechasai loy mashma elabocha yerushusa. If I say mine chasim should be also to you, I don't need the Mishnah to tell me that when they're no longer mine nechasim, they won't be also to you. It's pashut. So there's no chiddush whatsoever in the Mishnah. So that's why Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish have to mean a much greater chiddush that no matter what it wouldn't work. Zokt around the gedolim mizu shaninu b'pirkei lakamon. We have even a greater chiddush than this case. And the Gemara is going to bring it very shortly. If you tell your friend, I make an Issur for myself to go into your house. Sadacha, your field, shani lekayach. Meis oishem machul. So what if the person who owned that house died or sold it mutter? So when I'm saying I'm not allowed to have enough from your house, when the moment it's no longer your house, I'm allowed to have enough from it. The case of the Gemara later is not the owner of the house said you may not have enough from my house. The person said I'm not going to have enough from your house. So I'm answering myself to have enough in your house. If when I'm answering myself to have enough from your house, the lechel svuke, the motzi oyser anavshei nichse chaveroi, afilu achshet meshusai, I could be, if I want to say your house is also to me, I could say your house is also to me even after it doesn't belong to you anymore. Because I can answer anything on myself. I can answer your house on me. I can answer Dubi's house on me. I can answer any house on me. So when I'm taking the Issur upon myself, it's much more logical to say that the Issur should survive your ownership. Nevertheless, we say that his meaning was, Amrinan, the Amar Beischa, since I said Beischa, and I connect the ownership to you, I'm clearly meaning to express that I only want it to be usher to me while it belongs to you. Kolshkin when the owner of the house is making the neder, the ikalasvuke, there's a good reason to believe that it should only be relevant while it still is. Imotzi aser levaser sheyetze meshusai. Kolshkin, there it's not likely that I want to answer my house to you after it leaves my rishus, because it's not relevant to me. The pshita milsa the beloshen nichsi einay oiser ella v'oidin b'rshusai. When you say nichasai, my nechasim, clearly there's a connotation that while it's mine, it should be also to you. The vaday ki amar noider beischa oy nichsecha v'chi amar mader beisi oy nichsi l'shon yeshavenhem. When the person who's answering upon himself says your house, he also means to say while it's yours. So too, when I'm answering my nechasa on you, and I say nechasai, I'm also connecting the Issur to the fact that it belongs to me. Hilchach, and Issur der b'yochel v'shlokish, dafka b'nechasai amru, the ein adam Issur. If we're going to say that Rabbi Yochanan and Shlokish are not saying that there's a structural problem, you cannot be answering something that's not yours anymore. Rather, they're just talking about what the person intended with his language of nechasai. Then there's no chiddush here whatsoever. So all the Ran went to great lengths to do is to explain the Hanav in our Gemara, which we're going to back off from, why we understood Rabbi Yochanan or Shlokish to be referring about something structural. Because if it's just telling you that my language nechasai connects the Issur to me, we know that from other Mishnayos. So therefore, the chiddush of Rabbi Yochanan or Shlokish is that even if I expressly say I want these pairs to remain usher to you even after I'm after them, it does not work. So that is where we're holding in the Gemara now. Lema b'hakamipali. The Rabbi Shmuel Savri Adam Oyser Davar Shebesusai Afilu L'Chashayetzer Meshusai. Once you usher pairs on your friend, even if they become Hefker later on because of Shemitah, they remain usher to your friend. Rabbi Yochanan Shlokish Savri Ein Adam Oyser Davar Shebesusai L'Chashayetzer Meshusai. You can, if you answer your object on somebody else, you only have the ability to answer it to somebody else while it still belongs to you. Once it no longer belongs to you, your Issur has no impact on it.
And which topic, my Maluch, does Rabbi Shmuel say that this could happen?
I don't know yet. But his perfect Gemara, Mi'ika Lamanda Omar, is there anybody who holds? So it's funny because right when Chaim asked me this kasha, the Gemara takes exactly the opposite stance. The Tizber Fek Gemara, Mi Ikalaman da Amar, Ein Adam Oyser Davar Shebishusay L'Chachet Bishusay. Is there anybody in their right mind who could even suggest that you shouldn't be able to answer it? So the Gemara takes exactly the opposite position, because the Imkain, if you're going to say, in fact, that somebody holds that it doesn't work, the Imkain Zok the Gemara. Nifleg b'nechasim elu. Their machloike should be in a case where I said nechasim elu v'choshein b'nechasai. Their machloike should be by nechasim elu, which is where I'm expressly saying I want the Issur to survive my ownership. These nechasim should be aser. V'choshein b'nechasai. So let's see the Ran. Zok the Heilige Ran. Umakshinon, I'm at the last word on the third to the bottom line. Umakshinon, the Isa, Rabbi Yochanan v'Shlokish Savri, the Ein Adam Oyser. If you hold that Rabbi Yochanan holds that a person structurally cannot aser payers, and their Issur should hold even after their Hefker, Havalula Flugi Beheja. Rabbi Yochanan v'Shlokish, what was the case that they picked? They picked nechasai. They should have made themselves clear. That's number one. We also have a Mishnah that says, so we have two problems. If that's your main chiddush, Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, that even if I expressly state I want Issur to survive my ownership, so pick such a case. It should have been a case of nichasai, of nechasam elu. The chosh could be nechasai. V'su batnan, we have a Mishnah that says, the adam oizer davar shabisusai, l'chsheyetem misusai. The Mishnah says fakert, titnan, ha'omer lebnoi koidim sha'at in the heneli. If someone tells the son, you may not have enough for me. Mace, when the father dies, yirashenu. The son yarshens him, and it's mutter b'hana. The Issur is no longer there. Why? Because I only meant that my nechashim should be also to you, my son, while I'm alive. But what if the father said, "B'chayav v'maisai"? My son, my nechashim are also to you. Sai when I'm alive, and sai after I die. So then it says, "Imeis lo yirashenu." If he dies, he doesn't yarshin him. Well, first of all, what in the world does Issur Hana have to do with Hilchos Yerusha? That makes no sense at all, right? If anything, it should say that I yarshin him, but it's Asher Bana. So let's look at the Rav. Emes lo yirashenu, lav dafka lo yirashenu. Of course, it doesn't mean that the Yerusha doesn't work. The halachas of Yerusha apply no matter what. The nechasai, vada didei have it. Of course, the son yarshins his father. He just has a problem. He can't have enough of it. Since the Reisha used an expression of Yerushalayim, loymar shadinai kishari yarshim, this son will be like any other Yerush, meaning he can use the products that he yarshins from his father. Therefore, we use the parallel language, tanaseifanami lo Yerushalayim. But it doesn't literally mean that the Hilchos Yerusha don't work. Of course they work. Just loymar sheinei mutter lehenis from Yerushalayim. He yarshins it, but he can have no benefit from it. We learn from here the yochel adam lesser peraysh of al chaverei la'achashiyet mishusay. Here you have a father who's answering his nechatim on the son even after he died and they're no longer in his rishus. So you have a klor raya here that in fact you could put an Issur on your products to somebody else, and the Issur will carry on even after they no longer belong to you. So we have a major kasha on this approach to understand Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish as saying that it doesn't work, because chloride does work.
Why do you say that you yarshins him and he can't have a mother?
I don't want to get into that. After because it's 6:43. We'll follow up on that later. Zok to Gemara, not in Sarakasha. Shiny hacha dika amrlei b'chayavu v'moisai. It's not shver over there, because over there it says b'chayavu v'moisai. So the Gemara here is making a major concession. Up until this point, the Gemara understood Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish is saying that it's not possible. At this stage, the Gemara says, okay, I have to back off from that, because you've proved beyond a reasonable doubt that of course it's possible for me to make an Issur that will survive. So now I have to regroup and I have to say that it's all a question of here of what I meant. So in the Mishnah, you just proved to me that the Issur remains. That's because I said the Chayiv of Moisai. I was very explicit. I want the Issur to last. Mashenkin, in Rabbi Yochanan's case, I said Nichasai Alecha. Maybe there I connected it to the fact that it belongs to me. Correct Gemara, Mikol Mokim Kasha. It's still shver. Zokteran, Mikol Mokim Kasha, Zokteran, right over here. Elo dakatlo nichalan de Mikol Mokim Kasha, Pusha Kamaisa. The first kasha is still shver. If they held that even by Nechasam Elu it works, he should have discussed the case of Nechasam Elu. So at this point, the Gemara wants to say, if you say beferish, yeah, there of course the Issur stands. But what if I used a lashon that's not 100% muchach? I said Nechasam Elu. I'm not specifically saying I want it to last. I'm connecting it to Nechasam. There's a mashmois that it should last, but it's not beferish. If Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish agree, even in that case, that the Issur doesn't remain, they should have made it very clear. Yet they only said that when I said Nechasai Alecha, that's the only case where they said that the Issur doesn't carry on. Zok to Gemara, Elo b'nechasam elu, hula alma loy pligi. So now we're backing out again, and we're saying if you use the lashon Nechasam elu, where clearly you're not linking the Issur to it belonging to me. It's just an issue on the Nechasim. Even Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish agree that the Issur will carry on. Ki pligi v'nechasai. They're only arguing when I said nechasai should be ushered to you. Rabbi Shmuel Savri loishon nechasim elu loishon nechasai adam oiser. Even if I said nechasai alecha, which seems to connotate that they should only be usher while they belong to me, Rabbi Shmuel say no, once they're usher, they remain usher. Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish Savri, Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish holds no nechasai. Let me look at the back to clear it out. Nechasim elu, I believe, is what he's going to say. And nechasim elu adam oiser, but nechasai ain't adam oiser. So now the machlok is no longer structural. It's really a question: is when I said nechasai, do I mean that the Issur should remain or not? So now I just want to stop for 1 second. The Rabban Shmuel hold that even when you said nechasai, the Issur carries on. Why does the Issur carry on? So I believe the Ram says. The Rabbi Shmuel Sabri, I'm on the first widest line of the Ram. The Rabbi Shmuel Sabri, afilu nechasai adamoiser, v'chi amru elu lav davka. The pshita lahu, the chalechad amru nechasai, afilu kamar elu, ein dine el al nechasai, afilu achi adamoiser. Even if I mean they should only be when they belong to me, it still remains aser. Imishum the nechasai nami lo elamashma. Either because it means my nechasim that are mine now should be usher forever. That's one shot that it could what it could mean. The elu shein achshav nechasai kamer. These nechasim that are currently mine should remain usher forever. That's one shot, which is talking to what my intention was when I made the nether. But look at the second shot. Imishum the kibun the chaylo alai Issur sulepa. So this is the first tidbit of understanding that I can maybe try to answer your kasha. What's the svara? Why this shouldn't go away? It's not mine anymore. Because there's a svara of once Issur schal on something, it doesn't just fall off. So this is the best I can offer you, because this is all I found. So do I have a gavaltic, a pshat, with a pasuk and a raya? I don't. This is the only thing I have is kivan the chayla alai yisura sulei paka. There's such a concept. Okay, so now we're at the point where the whole machloikis is merely what I mean to say when I say nechasai. When I say nechasai, does it limit the Issur to when it belongs to me, like Reuchen and Rish Lakish, or does the Issur carry on even after it no longer belongs to me? So keep believing with nechasai. Rabbi Shmuel Savi loishon nechasai, mele loishon nechasai. Adam Oiser, Reuchen and Rish Lakish Savi nechasam elu Adam Oiser, nechasai ein Adam Oiser. Correct the Gemara. We're still not out of the dark yet. Umi ika lemanda Omar loishon nechasam elu, loishon nechasai. Could Rabbi Shmuel hold? When Rav and Shmuel hold that both these, the Issur extends past, but none be learned. And so can they brought in bism endict? Bitte. But now we learned. So this is the Mishnah that the Ran quoted earlier. If someone says, I will not go into, I'm going to have an Issur Hanah from your house, I'm going to have an Issur Hanah from your field, the halacha is meis oishamachri la'acher mutter. So you see clearly, Rav and Shmuel swore that when we wanted to say that once the Issur comes, it doesn't go away. You see clearly here in this case, it does go away. Where the person who was ushering the house on himself connected it to Beischa, connected the Issur to the house belonging to you. After it no longer belongs to you, the Issur goes away. So there, I'm not connecting the Issur to a certain owner. I'm just talking about the product itself. So then, but once again, you have a clear raya that when my language seems to indicate that I don't want the Issur to survive your ownership, it doesn't. So how could Rav and Shmuel say that it does survive? Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish says that if I said nechasai, it does not survive. Rabbi Shmuel remember, we just said Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, we just proved can't hold that structurally it doesn't work, because we've proven that you could ask for something even after it belongs to you. Rav and Shmuel, we proved that they have to agree that when you say nechasai, the Issur doesn't carry over, because we have a brisa that says if you say beischa, it doesn't carry over. So we can't have a machlokes, because either Rav and Shmuel is going to be share or Rabbi Yochanan is going to be share. So we have to say they both agree, and we have to say that Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish were not arguing Rav and Shmuel. Rav and Shmuel were discussing a case where I said nechasam elu. where I'm not connecting the Issur to a certain owner, and there the Issur remains even after they're Hefker. And Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish are addressing a different case. They're addressing a case where I said Nechasai, and over there it doesn't carry through. So it's very, very simple. So now let's go back to understand how Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish learn our Mishnah, and how Rav and Shmuel learn our Mishnah. Basically the question is, in the first case of our Mishnah, did you say Nechasai? Because if you said Nechasai, everybody agrees the Issur would not apply after it becomes Hefker. Or if I said Nechasam Elu, then it would. The Mishnah doesn't say clearly what I was talking about. So it's possible that the Mishnah is talking about where I said Nechasam Elu, and then you learn it's one case, and therefore even on Shvis it will be Asr. Or if you learn that it's speaking about Nechasai, then it wouldn't be Asr on Shvis, and the Shvis has to be a second nether. Because how you learn, like Rav and Shmuel, or like Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, will end up impacting how we learn Pshat in the Mishnah. So let's see. Okay, let's see where we have it. Let me see where the Ran actually speaks about how to actually read the Mishnah. Let's see where he says how to read the Mishnah. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish nami hachi mukmasis. Let's do this. Ela ki amrim Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish v'nichsep v'nechasai Rabbi Shmuel nechasai elu ve'elu v'letzli. Klaimar the Rav and Shmuel mukmi lo l'masnis and b'ayim nechasai elu. The Rav and Shmuel are going to learn when you said nechasai elu. The kibin domer elu. Since I said the word elu, it seems to indicate that the Issur shouldn't be connected to my ownership. Avagav domer nechasai hareki elu omrar nechasam elu v'asiri and there'll be Asr afilu la'achar shagiyas shviyas. The Reisha Rabuzaka Mashmalan, and the Chiddush of the Reisha is that the Issur extends even after they no longer belong to me. And the Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish agree to Rav and Shmuel's explanation of the Mishnah. Don't say that when our Mishnah says that the Issur that you made before Shemitah also applies on the Shemitah year. Don't say it means afilu b'nichasai. If you said nechasai, then it wouldn't be also by Shemitah. The time of Mishum the Kivin the Nachas be Usura Sulai Pak. Don't say that. The lesser. If I said nechasai alecha, then loy mitzeru, they will only be osir elaki isnu b'rshusay before the Shemitah year. Avaligi Shavias, but when Shavias arrives, oichel min anoites to pakalu saru. So both Rav and Shmuel are learning that the Mishnah is speaking in the case when you said nechasai elu, which means that the Issur should survive even after it becomes Hefker, and they'll all learn that Uvishvius is not a new case, rather Uvishvius is just a continuation. Since I said Nechasai Elu, it means that the Nechasim remain Asr forever, and therefore even on the Shemitah they'll be Asr. And everybody also agrees that if you said Nechasai Alecha, then come Shemitah, it would not remain Asr anymore. So there's no Machlokes Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish. Zok Gemara weiter. Uvishvius ein yord l'seichel deyu. On Shemitah, you cannot go into his rishos. The oichel min anoitais, the pear de Hefker inun, we let him eat the pears that he can access from outside the property. Why? Because on Shemitah they're Hefker. Aranami Hefker. Is the land not Hefker as well? Now it doesn't literally mean that it's Hefker. It just means he has a right to access it. So if he has a right to access it because of his pears, let him go to it. Now, if you notice, the Ran has a different girsa. The Ran says, Aranami Rachmana Afkare. You see that? And the Ran says, Lakitas Perish. It means you're allowed to go in. You're allowed to go into Yadim's property to get Perish. So why can't you go collect? But before we get into the Gemara, you see there's a child of it's Rachmana Afkare or not. Remember, I was referring to a Machlokes to Mabit and the Minchas Chinuch before. Do you have to be Mafkeret or is it automatic from Hefker? So they bring a raya from this 2-year size. If you learn Ma'achmana Afkari, it means it becomes Hefker without you. But if you're not going to like our Gersa, it means you have to be Mafker. So Frank Gemara, why doesn't the same Shemitah that allows me to take the parish should allow me access to the field to take the parish? You're right. If the fruit trees are smack in the middle of the field, yes, he has a right of access. The type of pears that we're talking about in the Mishnah, where you're not allowed to access it, if it's a tree that's right near the edge of the property. So you don't need to access the property. There, the Issur no will not allow you to go into the property. Because you can access the pears, you can invoke your Shemitah rights without coming into my property. In fact, it's speaking about fruits that are smack in the middle. And then technically you're allowed to go in. because without on Shemitah, the Torah said you have a right to access the payers. But the problem is, what if you stay a little bit longer than you needed to actually cultivate, to actually cut those payers? Now you're over Shana. It's too dangerous. Therefore, you got to get out. So the Ran asks, so Oy Bezoi, why do we let a guy do Bika Chayim with standing? He might sit, he might stay there too long. We have such a gzeira. So Dr. Ran, when it comes to Bika Chayim, when you're standing, we're not worried. Since you're doing the Bika Chayim in an unusual way, we're not worried. But when you're coming to cut, you can stay an extra second, and that'll be violating an Issur Ano. Okay, Gavaltik, let's stop here.
Was my